Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back. This is, I think, the third or fourth of Trading Places. And it's a little series that I think is kind of fun. And I'm finally getting to Australia down under with Ben Rankin. There is a link below. There will be a link below to his channel. All things Australia, but not only, but would you say it's Australia heavy?
Pretty Australia heavy. I also put in a bit of New Zealand stuff as well. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I
like
didn't.
everything New Zealand does, we claim it as our own, like Russell Crowe.
Oh, is he from New Zealand?
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
long history
I
of
need to go get my Xena box sets then. I think
yeah.
Your Princess. Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. I love Xena. Okay, there's a guilty pleasure there. But are you in Melbourne?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay. I have a little bit of the advantage or disadvantage because the premise here is I pick five artists from Australia or New Zealand, but I didn't pick New Zealand. But I can pick from the entire country because really, I mean, as an American, I don't know if a band's from Melbourne or from Sydney or from the Outback or where they're from. I mean, obviously I can't look. And you have to narrow it down either, in my case, the San Francisco Bay Area or Seattle. Your choice. You can do both, Pacific Northwest, whatever. So you don't get the whole friggin' America. Sorry.
There's a few bands to choose from
Yeah,
San Francisco and
absolutely.
Seattle, so I think
Absolutely.
that's all right.
So we've selected five. We don't know which each other is going to choose, and I think because I'm the home team, you're going to bat first. That's a baseball analogy, and Ben, you can start.
Well, it's good that you did bring up baseball because before I
Oh,
start,
I know who you're going to pick.
as a bringing our two worlds together.
Oh, that's
Grant,
not who I thought you were going to pick. Okay.
Grant McClellan from the Go Betweens. This is his first solo album, and he's wearing a San Francisco 49ers hat.
Okay.
Terrible cover, but I was
Yeah, that is kind of a cheesy cover there.
trying to bring SF and Melbourne together.
Okay.
Well,
I, I get it. I get it. You
you
just
know,
wanted to just show off a little bit there, like a.
I was just say I'm not being combative. I'm here to bring our worlds together.
Uh, well, I have no problem with Australia. Just as of this recording, our new president just issued three tariffs: Canada, Mexico, and China. Like so, not
Mm.
Australia. So, as Randy Newman says in his great song "Political Science," about drop the big one and see what happens. We'll save Australia. Don't want to hurt no kangaroo. I love that. That
Thanks, Randy.
great lyric. All right.
All right, let's go to San Francisco. Band I'm going to choose is a bit of a cult band from late
Hmm.
70s, 76. I think they were still pumping out records in
A
up
Chrome
until
Dinette.
what's that?
A Chrome Dinette.
No, just Chrome.
Oh,
So
because there was a
Alien
Chrome
soundtrack.
Dinette too. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I probably didn't find out about this band until maybe the mid to late 90s. My wheelhouse is kind of punk, indie rock, shoegaze, all that sort of thing. So probably record store I went to called Go Records. Guys in there would have brought up this band. Also, probably someone like Thurston Moore. He brings up a million different bands. Probably would have heard him speaking about them as well. And I was like pretty intrigued because all these people who I dig kept mentioning this record, but I didn't actually get vinyl until very recently. I only had a CD of
Only. Oh
this
my
album.
God. How
I
God.
know, but
Oh.
it worked out
I
really
don't know
well.
that record. I don't know that record.
Okay, well it's they're probably a big
I've heard of the
influence.
band. I mean, I got confused with Chrome Dinette. So I don't. So you said 87-ish?
No,
Oh,
76 they
77. I'm
started.
being
So I
dyslexic.
think this is like 77, 78. This album.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, they probably paved the way a bit for stuff down the track like industrial noise rock and kind of the more extreme ends of the alternative underground world. So probably Big Black would be a
Would
band.
Throbbing Gristle be in that kind of?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. These guys are don't use as much as far as electronics go. No drum machines. It's a live drummer, but they do have like a lot of cut up and collage sounds and things like that in there. So snippets from TV. They're obsessed with like um, aliens invading Earth and all this sort of
Sounds
shit
like the
like that.
Residents a little bit in that.
So yeah, but they're like, but the guitars are like, set to stun, like they're just overloaded over the top. The beats are kind of almost motoric. I would compare them to like a really chaotic noise,
Okay.
where it's noise sort of more that droning sound where it's a little bit more hypnotic, where these goes a bit more harder edge. Like vocals are usually lower in the mix and got an effect of some sort on them as well. One of the blurbs on the front of the album, I quite like this description, which I'll read, which says, "Humans are the cancer of the planet. All people have untapped psychic powers. Acid is good. Aliens exist." These are just some of the ideas that pioneering San Francisco acid punk band Chrome was grappling with in its music. And that to the fact that Chrome's founder, Damon Edge, described himself as having, get this, clairaudient syndrome, a condition that allows you to hear something before it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is a pretty good description of this band. So that was for this record, Red Exposure. But I reckon if you're going to dip your toe in them, be this one.
Oh, I've seen that. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is probably
I haven't heard
the
it.
most closest they get to more of a fuller sound. Like it's got a lot more guts in the bass and drums, which really suits that motor rhythm. So it's a really like it's not the sort of thing you'd put on for a laid back evening or anything like that. It's very full on, not metal at all, influenced by punk and all those things, in that sort of blender of industrial and
Nice.
those types of things thrown in. Really good. This is probably the image that most people know from that album.
Okay.
So, and lastly, just the Blood on the Moon.
Now, are you one of those people that when there's a band that you latch on to, you kind of get all in and want to get all their stuff, or is it varies?
Depends on the band, really.
Right, right.
Um, I as many bands as I latch onto, I might drop off as well, and then I'll hear something 10 years later, and it'll be like, oh, they're doing something good again, so I'll
Got
grab
it.
that. But really, yeah, I don't feel the need for anything I get into. I got to own everything. There are some people which I pursue, but in my opinion, anyway, I think that's because the quality is always there, and maybe someone like Nick Cave is like that for me because even though he's more probably last 4 or 5 records, they always take me a little while to get into now. I don't
'Cause he
because
changes. He's been kind of in this a stream of a home period in the last
yeah, yeah,
like
and
since
just
Ghosteen or before Ghosteen, Sky, whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it almost like at one point, maybe in the 90s, it seemed unimaginable that he would be using sound beds um and like electronics and things like that. It just didn't seem a thing. So, because that was when I got into him in the early 90s. And so I always have to make that mental leap every time he has a new album out. And I kind of trust in him that I'll get it eventually.
Well, you
And
kind of, when we were texting back and forth, you told me that I wasn't allowed to show Nick Cave. We'll see if that is,
we
if I
can bring him up.
abided by your rules. It's funny. I mentioned Nick Cave's name in a recent Marianne Faithful video I did. And
Mm.
of course, I don't know if you were the one that called me. You called me on it. I said Nick Cage, because it's so easy to say Nick Cave and Nick Cage, and you're saying it like this, and I didn't catch it until after I recorded it. So I think you
There's
busted.
a fantastic story. I don't know if you're familiar with Nick Cave's Red Right Hand Files
Oh yeah,
online.
his online. Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
tells a story about Nicolas Cage and people always saying he's Nicolas Cage and vice versa. And he actually ran into him. I'll let you find it because
Yeah, I gotta. I would like to see. I'd like to see those two together.
he
That would be.
writes it really well and it's very funny.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm
that's
starting.
Chrome.
I'm
There's
st
the
Oh,
box they come
oh,
from.
sorry. I thought you were
But
finished.
that's come out a few years ago, so probably about 4 or 5 of those come out of that box.
Okay, so that covers multi albums. That's not just one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I think you showed that on your channel, haven't you?
Uh, I don't know
No?
if I have actually, because if they're not Australian. Like
Okay.
I lost my mind last year and did that best US bands ever and got
Okay.
mocked by many because I didn't put any of the big ones in. But
Got
you
it.
guys had already covered those people, so I thought I'd do something different.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'm starting early with my introduction. As far as I know, this might be the first Australian band that I ever bought a single of, and I bought the album that year. Now
Oh,
you're gonna notice that a couple of the things that I show have different covers in the Australian version because,
mm,
especially
mm.
in the '60s and early '70s, the American labels would change, not only our album art, but track listing, alter them, take some off, throw in singles. And of course, what to me, one of the greatest singles of 1967 is Friday on My Mind, of course. So this is the Americans. This is my original 1967 copy. There was a record store day copy a few years ago. I believe this might have been, I don't know if this was the original cover in Australia. It's a slightly
I
different order. Do you know?
To be honest, I only know the green one. That's the one I've got.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, yeah. So, but I have seen that other cover before, but that was a bit later on in my sort of
well,
discovering that
like all
CD.
those, like the British bands, like the obviously the claim to fame here too. From we just lost in the last month or two, Shal Tamley, this great
Mm.
American producer, expatriate from California who lived in London, who produced My Generation by The Who. I think that's the only album that he produced for The Who, and then he got fired by Kit Lambert, which is
I
unfortunate.
love how this guy was the producer of some of the most definitive English
The
bands
great
there
Kinks
was. Yeah.
records. Obviously not Waterloo Sunset. After
Mm.
that, it's amazing that Ray Davis produced everything himself for the Kinks.
Mm.
Never had another outside producer. But Shal Tamley did some great stuff. And of course,
Mm.
this album, but Friday on My Mind is an incredible single. And then Bowie does it, on pinups
Yeah.
in the 70s. Um, Australian band, but emigrated to London. Really kind of was part of the English scene in the late 60s. So I hope that's okay. They're still Australian based. Um,
Well, no, there's a long history of Australian bands once they've had success here going to the UK and then failing.
yeah, with that, or going back and forth. Well, because a
Yeah.
lot of people will think that the Bee Gees are an Australian band, but they're from Manchester area,
Mm.
emigrate to
Yeah.
Australia, move back. They did some recordings in Australia,
Yeah.
but
A lot of those people ended up over here because their parents were part of a program where it was cheap for people from Europe and the UK to come out here and start a new life. So,
right, that's like
um,
in the Kinks album Arthur, the whole song Australia
yeah,
that ends
yeah.
as is about just that, the Victorian era. Um, Of course, George Young is a rhythm guitar player who would be the older brother of the younger Young brothers who started AC/DC. I think he produced and maybe even managed AC/DC. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, both George Young and Harry Vanda were the production team for Albert's Music, which released bands like they were known mainly for like AC/DC, The Angels, early Rose Tattoo, kind of hard rock stuff. But on the flip side, they also did pop music like John Paul Young,
Oh,
who did, Lovers in the Air,
yeah.
which has been re-released 1,000 times. But yeah, they were like the in-house production and songwriting team for Albert's Music in Sydney.
And then this is their 68 album. I think this is a hit and miss. They're trying to be a little more serious in 68. There's still some pop stuff, like neo psychedelic a little bit. There's some great tracks on here. The title track, Falling Off the Edge of the World, but it's not a great album, really. And they kind of floundered, at least in America. But
Mm.
and then George Young was what Flash in the Pan, I remember in the late
Yeah.
70s. Was it 77, 78, 9? Had that single Walking in the Rain that got a lot of
Mm.
FM radio play, at least in the Bay Area.
Well, according to the because I recently read the book about the history of Alberts, which it actually started off selling sheet music and harmonicas over here, and then developed into a music publishing company. And um, the flash in the pan stuff, a lot of those songs were songs they couldn't find to fit the Alberts artists, and so they were
It,
encouraged
it
by it.
seems like a novelty record in a
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
right?
And so if you see the old film clips, they kind of have their faces hidden and stuff like that,
That's
which
the
is pretty
secret
funny.
band. The
Yeah.
secret. All right. Well, that's it. Your turn.
Okay. I've, this is a band I got to be honest, only recently. Well, I thought I only recently found out about called the
Uh,
Units, which were kind of a synth post-punk new wave with they got some pop hooks in there. They're I don't know if you know them or had seen them, but
I've
from
seen it's like late 80s, right? It's
yeah,
kind of,
yeah,
yeah.
it's I think this actually come out in 1980. This album, this is a reissue,
Oh,
which is
okay.
extra tracks on it. Um, but apparently they were like a like an art performance thing as well. So which like a lot of sort of bands ended, came from art college and things like that, and their early shows were more like almost an installation piece, and then they become more of a band as they went on. But what I like about these guys is it's all synth led, and there's lots of great little electronic bleeps and blops in there the way. But like Gary Newman and his early records, I love the drum sound because they use a live drummer, so it's really got a lot of punch and groove to it. And it's
Yeah, that horrible early uh phony electric drums. Just I yeah.
yeah, where these have like a real snap in the snare drum, which I really like from the live drummer. They ended up getting it better as they went along with electronic drum sounds and that. But yeah, this is really good. Like they're probably peers of the LA band The Screamers,
Uh-huh.
who were like a synth
I
punk
have
band
that.
as
Yeah, yeah.
well. Yeah, probably around the same time. They may have played together. Vocals on this remind me a bit of Devo in early Devo, those sort of higher range ones. Um, yeah, like I to be honest, I don't know a great deal about them other than when I heard this like in store at one of my favorite record stores. And
I
it's
mean, the
like
late
this.
70s, early 80s, there was when the punk scene happened, obviously Mabuhay Gardens, and there was a lot of venues that were temporary or opened up. There was a Brazilian restaurant that had bands like the Contractions, all a trio of three women play around
Mm.
a lot, and they would have what's the other place? The Deaf Club, which was an actual club for deaf people, but
Oh,
on the
okay.
weekends they had punk bands upstairs in the
Yeah.
Mission. The
Because
deaf
isn't
people
there
would
a
be there.
isn't there a dead Kennedy's
Yeah,
live
there's a
record?
couple of live things from there. I used to go there
I
a
didn't
lot.
realize it was legitimately, yeah, for
It
deaf
was it
people.
was a deaf club by day or night. And then, there was this is a time that's happened probably in a lot of cities. I know it was in LA and New York. Like in LA, you got Madame Wong's, that was a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown in LA. And some guys come in and said, you're not very busy on these days. Can we have bands play? And of course, it brings people in. The bars go crazy, and Madame Wong's. And then there was another. Now I'm switching to LA, I know, but it's had a huge following and a huge history. And like Mabuhay Gardens was a Filipino restaurant bar, the Fab Man, and literally that's what it was. And someone put on shows there, and it became famous as a punk venue. And there were a lot of performance spaces into the early '80s where bands probably like Unit. I remember
Yeah,
the name, and I don't think I've heard that, but there's a lot of performance things.
yeah.
Obviously, from the '70s, you had, as I said earlier, you had I was going to say the replacements. You had the Residents, Tuxedo Moon, Snake Finger,
Mm,
that stuff that then it merged from that artsy thing into performance pieces, and that was definitely one of them. Yeah,
yeah. This is like surprisingly catchy too. Like
I'm
they
sure it's got hooks, right?
definitely had an ability with a hook and a melody, amongst probably, yeah, more so than a lot of those other synth punk bands of the time. Yeah, cool
Okay.
stuff.
Unit. All right, I got oh, you have more? No?
No, I was just
Okay.
rearranging things.
This next band, I have only the first album in America. I think this is their first album, and again, it's another Australian band that has a totally different cover art than the original. I think this is better than the Australian artwork. This is the one time I like it better. 1984, the Hoodoo Gurus. Um, I'm sure you have that right handy,
I
right?
have to completely disagree with you. That is fantastic.
Yeah, I like this.
I
I know.
guess you would pick that one because I saw it on your Instagram.
Yeah, you knew I was going to do it. Yeah, exactly. Um, they're kind of like a new wave power poppy thing. You know, I hadn't played this in a while, and I saw them. They came through San Francisco a few times, and I did see them a couple times because I had this friend of mine, my friend Molly, was really into them, and she kept saying, "Oh, the Hoodoo Gurus," and she worked for a label, 415 Records, and then that was Howie Klein, who later would go to, who would put out Romeo Void and I forgot what other bands right now, but he would move to and be president of Sire Records, but. This is a good record. It's good hooks, power pop. I don't know do you like them? Are you a fan?
Yeah, I love them. I've got
You probably have
probably about
everything.
5 or 6 of their records. They actually were pretty big over here. Had like after this record, there's like a song called like Wow, Wipeout, and I'm drawing a blank at the moment. There's Call Anytime, songs like that were quite successful over here. And Dave Faulkner, the singer and guitarist, he's originally from Perth and was in one of the early punk bands in Australia called the Victims. And also in that band was the James Baker, who was like the drummer who was in like every influential Australian punk band ever. And what's his name? Brad Shepherd, the other guitarist, he was also in a band called the Fun Things, which are like if you try and find originals of those 7 inches, it'll cost you an arm and a leg. But yeah, he went on and played in the Hitmen, who was Chris Musuak from Radio Birdman's next band, and then eventually, yeah, they come together. Like they were all part of the scene, Hoodoo Gurus, playing in lots of well-known bands, and a lot of the bands, even from Melbourne in the late 70s and early 80s, would move to Sydney because that was kind of where it's at that time. Sadly, it's not as strong as like it's kind of Melbourne leapfrogged it through the 90s and they also was it early 90s early 2000s there were really prohibitive lockout laws for venues and a lot of venues shut down so
Is there
but
a
yeah
big is there a city that has a really great strong music scene, or is it just across the board?
Melbourne is I know this probably sounds biased but
Well,
you can go at any night of the week and see a great band whether it be local or international anything, from jazz through to punk and electronic music. We're very, for the size of our city, we're very spoilt for live music and also a ridiculous amount of independent record stores for, the population. So yeah, so we're very, very lucky, the fact that my band, we can find a gig as well.
oh, I didn't know you were in a band.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I've been playing in bands for like
What do you
30 odd
play?
years.
What do you play?
I'm the guy who counts the band in at the start of the song.
Do you play an instrument?
Good drummer joke. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh, got it. So
yeah,
basically, you're the guy that right before you get famous, they'll kick you out of the band.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I knew a guy who was the drummer, the original drummer for Romeo Void, and there was a San
Yeah,
Francisco band, Romeo,
yeah,
and he got kicked out literally like the month before they started recording. And of course, there's always Pete Best, um,
yeah, yeah,
Moon. Well, he was in the band, but anyway, I don't, yeah, and Spinal Tap. Don't Was it Spinal Tap?
yeah.
Uh,
All the
Drummers kept
dynamic.
exploding or something. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Terrible gardening accident, which
Okay.
came true for Jeff Porcaro, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, right. That is kind of bad. All right, your turn. I only have one Hoodoo Gurus.
All right, I'm going to show a record that the vinyl Richie said he bought and was very boring, but I'm going to show it anyway by DJ Shadow,
Oh,
who I actually found out about this by pure accident in the early 90s when I moved down to Melbourne from the country. I worked in a record store. Well, then it was a CD store, and they accidentally ordered this in on vinyl, and it sat on the shelf for months. And I was just intrigued by this cover. I didn't know anything about it at all, and had never heard of him. And just when they were going, okay, we can probably send this back now, because then in those days you could send stock
Oh, so it's
stock.
that old. Okay, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, but and then I just took a last minute chance. I just grabbed it and thought the the cover's just too intriguing. There's something, I don't know why. I just love this cover.
It's people like digging in a record
Record
store.
store.
How
Yeah.
can you not like it?
Well, but when I was in the 90s, that was rare, except for in secondhand record stores
Because of
and
CDs.
indies, because all the ones of that. And so I put it on and it kind of blew my mind. And being a drummer, it was kind of weird because of the first song introducing, it's got this sample of this guy saying, "Oh, I'm a um I'm a drummer and I'm also a drum teacher," and there's all this like spiel,
Introducing, right?
this
Yeah.
kind of thing, while there's these amazing electronic beats going on. Um, yeah, like was probably, I was probably not aware. Like there was, I had hip hop stuff, but like obvious things like Tribe Called West, Kept Quest, and Public Enemy, and De La Soul, and things like that. But probably wasn't really thinking as much about sample based music until I went headlong into this. And yeah, like because it covers like obscure jazz and soul, funk, even prog and psychedelic sounds. And it's kind of got this epic filmic sound. Like it's
Absolutely.
quite a hypnotic, amazing record, I think.
I'm
So
going to say this right off the back officially because I know he's watching. Vinyl Richie, you are fucking wrong. I absolutely love that record. Now, DJ Shadow is from Sacramento, California, but came to San Francisco came a lot and dug around. I love that. I bought the CD. I think I bought the CD first. I know the vinyl for years, but I got into that kind of, I don't want to say mixologist, but sampling things with that. Obviously, with Paul's Boutique by
mm.
Beastie Boys.
Oh
Also,
yeah, Beastie Boys,
DJ Crush. I mean, not San Francisco artist, but DJ Crush that did, there's a kind of, some of it was that smooth, and it got into the Buddha bar stuff and all these mix things. And I remember in the 90s, that stuff was kind of had a real popular cult following. You go to
yeah,
lounges and they would play shit like, I love that record.
yeah,
And I
I
just
think it's
think it's
brilliant.
brilliant. And, when people say, well, there's no musicians playing anything, that's cheating. And, at that time, this is all before you could do the stuff you do now, like in Pro Tools, or not. I mean, Pro Tools was probably around. I don't know how he did
Yeah,
that record, but it's brilliant. And I have seen, it's weird when you say I saw a DJ perform. I've seen DJ Shadow once, maybe 5, 6, 7 years after that album came out, and was brilliant. And I love
yeah.
it.
I saw him when the Private Press, this one
Yeah,
came out,
I have that. Yeah.
the next one, and
I have that
it
on
was,
CD.
it
I mean,
was amazing because it sound, as you say, it sounds funny. It was a live show. He did it
yeah,
live,
he does it live.
and
So
unlike
but
most
never two
DJs,
shows will never be the same.
yeah, and he
Kenny live.
played
Yeah.
everything like a song. So
Yeah.
that it wouldn't just like a normal DJ just continues through for the whole evening. He would play it as a piece, and then he'd move on. And he had this mic, and he kind of, I don't know if he'd had blowback or something like that, but he had this mic where before every song he'd go, "Okay, I'll be using these turntables, this sampler, this drum machine," and explain how he put, and he'd make a point of saying, "And it's all live," and he'd be running backwards and forwards
Yeah.
like crazy, putting it. It was unbelievable.
You have to know your music. You have to know your records to do it, to make it
And
work.
his taste is phenomenal too, of the things that he found. Like he must have just dug so much to find some of these obscure things. And
But also
there's
records were cheap when he was buying that stuff.
yeah.
They were
Well,
like 50 cents.
have you seen this doco Scratch, which
I
it's
have.
all,
I have.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
great footage of him in his like special hidey hole in the basement of one of these record stores that he's one of the few who gets access to, and he pulls all of these like rare beats and things like that. It's really great. Like it's about turntablism in general. So you've got like the people like DJ Qbert, who are, it's probably not something you'd put on and listen to, but you can appreciate the dexterity and the skill he has. But yeah, to me, I consider DJ Shadow a real musician, and I also loved when he did this collaboration record with James Lavelle from the Mo Wax label
I haven't
from
heard
in
that one.
England.
No.
It's called Uncle. I think
Oh,
this
is
is the
it
album with
Uncle
DJ Shadow.
UNK? that Uncle.
UNKLE, and
Yeah,
it's science.
I know Uncle. I have some of their
Yeah.
records.
So this is the one which has got the track where Richard Ashcroft sings on one, and
Yeah.
Tom York, and I think Mike D from the Beastie Boys. So yeah, and yeah, that early stuff around that time, DJ Shadow, I just think's amazing. I kind of he dropped off the radar for me a little bit after that because I felt like he wasn't ahead of the game anymore.
Yeah, he had a moment, right?
Yeah.
It was a good moment, but he had a moment. I don't know. I have no idea what he does now either, personally.
Yeah, well, I think he's coming out here very soon, or he's here now. I think I saw something about that. But
Okay.
yeah, I like that whole era of sample-based music, and yeah, except for when it started to be like, as you say, when you go to every cafe and have
Yeah. Well,
the
that was a thing for a while. I mean, I remember you'd go to there around the corner from my house in San Francisco. There's this place called Blowfish Sushi, and it was one of the great sushi bars in San Francisco, I thought. And it was literally around the corner from where I lived. So we'd go there
Mhm.
we'd go there happy hour early, and they had these great anime cells on the wall and videos of anime. And I bring my son who was kind of young, and a lot of the animes they were showing was kind of that semi soft core porn anime from Japan on the video. But Joe's great. I mean, you talk to your kid about shit anyway. Um, but they always would play like later on, like once 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock hit, and it was open till midnight, I think. Like this drum and bass stuff, just
Mm.
bass stuff, heavy, heavy, heavy stuff, and which is great. But that's all they played, so I didn't want to go there loud because you couldn't hear, you couldn't think. But of course, every year in the it was called the SF Guardian, the newspaper, like the not the underground paper, but the freebie thing where it had
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
porno ads in the back. I don't know if Australia has that. And
yeah. We had a
Blowfish
few.
Sushi, like 5 years in a row, was nominated. That if you met someone on a first date and you brought your first date to Blowfish, 99% time you'd get laid after after that thing. So I don't know what that's about. I just lived around the corner. Uh, but they used to play a lot of that kind of in the after, like at happy hour Buddhist stuff and that very
Yeah.
loungy stuff and mixologist stuff, whatever. I know it's not mixologist. Okay, I'm going to 1988, the fifth album by the band The Church, and Starfish is this album. This album broke them in America. This was
Mm.
fabulous. Was a huge record in America, pretty big for the time, especially because of the song "Under the Milky Way." A little bit of a shoegazy, smooth. I don't say smooth. Neo psych, pop thing. Good riffs, great instrumentation, really well recorded. Just a wonderful record. And last year. I know one of the guys is not in the band anymore, but they did an acoustic set at Easy Street Records. When
Okay.
this is a Intervention Records is a Northwestern audio quote file label, all analog stuff with these beautiful covers, and it's from the CD. It's over three sides, and the side four are bonus tracks of songs that either outtakes or singles or
Yeah.
I don't even know them that well. It's a nice beautiful set, Starfish. But uh, they did a live in store when this came out at Easy Street. So I went to see them, and they were great. It was more of an acoustic thing. I don't know a lot of their other stuff before this. Again, I feel like I'm limited with these bands from Australia, but I love this record. It's definitely a record of that 80s time that kind of, it's not as chill as Dream Pop is like the
Mm.
Cocteau Twins or that stuff. It's more of a upbeat stuff, but I think it's a great record.
Yeah, they get grouped in a bit with the Paisley Underground
Yeah.
thing as well in the early 80s. And it was Marty Wilson Piper, who's who you're thinking of, who's no longer in the band, he was there from the start. Yeah, they last year they have. I don't know how what the distribution is like over in the US or Europe, but they reissued all about the four records which came before Starfish,
How are they?
and they're really good. Like I had them anyway, but I've been a big fan of the Church for quite a while, and yeah, I love those early records. Yeah, there's all those things you said, like they have that touch of psychedelic. I guess it's kind of the yeah before shoegaze was the thing. You can hear elements in there. Probably not as heavy on the guitar pedals as,
It's not a heavy band at all, and there's
but
great
it's
harmony
just
vocals,
kind of
great.
spacey and a lot
And
of
there's
space.
lush. The vocals are very lush, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's very appealing. It's very appealing, you
yeah.
know.
Good live band too. And
Yeah.
the guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who replaced Marty Wilson Piper is from another Australian
That
band
the real
called
tall guy is a real tall.
Powderfinger. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who I always on my channel call the Australian Eagles because they're so fucking boring. But that's another story.
All right, your turn.
All right. My next one is kind of like a person who's been in a million bands, and it's John Dwyer,
Hmm.
who started off with a band called the Coach Whips. He may have done stuff for this, but this is my what I first knew, and they were like a real garage rock in your face kind of band. And then as a reaction to this, he wanted to do because their shows were apparently really full on in the late 90s, and he did what was called the OCs or OCS. They were
OCs, the
got to
OCs.
fit down because if they've changed their name so many times.
They have it. Sometimes it's SEE.
VOCs, OCS,
Yeah.
OCs. Now currently it's OSEES.
Yeah.
Apparently it also stood for Orange County Sound
And
or
that's why a lot of people
Orinoco
didn't know they were in the
Craft.
Bay Area. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is kind of almost like a bedroom recording of weird little freak folk songs with strange sound collages in between, that sort of thing. And then a bit later on, he put together more of a band, and they were almost like a freak folk band. They were mainly acoustic based, but yeah, lots of weirdness in there as well. But then like the I think the garage rock was calling his name again, and I think this is about where I came in on Sucks Blood.
What year
And
is that?
that one, 2007,
Okay.
that one. So, and I just like, they're like King Gizzard, Lizard Wizard. They just have pumped out records.
Now, what's with King Gizzard? Okay, we'll talk. I didn't pull a King Gizzard. I only have one King Gizzard album, but
What do you mean? What's with them?
well, like it seems like every other week they put out a new album.
Well, because they can. Like,
Is it,
I
aren't they like
like,
the Grateful Dead where they just let people press their records or something, I heard? Is
they
that,
did. Well, that was in 2017. They promised we're going to release 5 records in 1 year,
oh, they do
and
like
each
that every
record
month.
had it. Yeah, each record had its own kind of theme and vibe, and one of them it was kind of like a more of a overview, I guess, of all the things they do. And it was the one where they just said, you can either, as a punter, here's the files. You can burn this for your own personal use, or you can release it on your label. So it had the music files and the artwork files. Um, and yeah, which I thought was fantastic because,
I'm glad I'm not a collector of that band.
oh, there's a lot of records.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of, and I only get certain things of their bootlegger series, which is kind of like their official
Right.
unofficial live shows, which I think Fuzz Club and Levitation release a lot of those records. But I just reckon they're amazing because I remember when they first started and I saw them and they were a support band and they were just this kind of really loose garage band. And then the next record they released, which was kind of like, wow, that's an interesting move for your second record, is it all instrumental spaghetti western with Ambrose Kenny Smith's father, who's Broderick Smith, doing a spoken word story over the top. And I was kind of like, all right, this band's worth checking
I
out.
like when bands do that. The Beastie Boys did that. They did like a
Yeah,
secret agent theme band once of instrumental stuff. Uh,
yeah,
I love when the bands like do some weird off the wall,
yeah. Well,
like
that's
almost
pretty much
experimental.
nearly every King Gizzard record is its own entity. And yeah, I like how that's all self-released. They're completely independent,
So
have
they
their
don't
own.
count as one of my choices because I'm not showing their records. So that's
Anyway, I was talking about John Dwyer.
right. I sidetracked you. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, I really thought they'd come into their own when they had the two drummer lineup. Like there was the original band, which was a drummer, Bridget Dawson she played keyboards and did backup vocals, and there was a guy called Peter Dammit who played, those guitar. I can't remember what they're called. They're those guitars, but they like play more. They're like a not a bass guitar, but they're actually got six strings, and they play. You can play lead stuff on it, but you also can play. There's a word for it, and I'm just can't think of it. Anyway, he filled out the bottom end with that, but it's still like not bass bottom end, if that makes sense. And so he kind of like had done it all he could with them to a certain extent, and then he put together this new band, and this is where like they just brought in things from everything from baroque pop to prog to metal tinges, just flat out weirdness. And so all of these records from this point on are just incredible. And then just when you thought you know what he's going to do, he got back with Bridget and released one called OCS. And there's also was a live version of this, and it was brought it back to acoustic, brought strings in. So it's a really, yeah, beautiful. Probably not beautiful in the way most people think, like Nick Drake or anything like that, but
That would
it's
be
yeah,
beautifully depressing, like Nick Drake.
kind of not depressing, yeah, but it's like it's got strings, acoustic guitars, great melodies. Like they've kind of always had unusual song structures and things like that. But this is it's kind of, I guess I'd call it a modern freak folk record, for the want of a better word. But anyway, then it was like this gargantuan thing, which was just then you could tell he was into krautrock by this point, and probably bought that Chrome record as well. There's a whole lot of crazy stuff going on that, and as well as all of the stuff like that, he just went out and thought, you know what, I'm going to do a full-on hardcore punk record,
I haven't heard that
and
one.
it sounds like it come out in 1980. It's yeah, I don't. He's my age, and like, so he should be like resting a lot more. But they're like full on. And then recently, they've got right into chucked out the guitars, and they've released these two records, which are all keyboard based, synth punk, but like the synths are really in the red. Still the two drummer lineup and big bottom end sound. Really interesting band on record, and one of the best live bands in the world at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. If you just want to be blown away by just relentless, but in a good way. You're never going to see him on a huge stage or anything like that. And yeah, and he's also, if there's not enough OC's records, there's about 4 or 5 of his solo project called Damage Bug, which is kind of his uh, home studio one man band type of things. And then there's a whole bunch of these improvisation records where him and everyone from Jazz Dudes to I think one of the guys from TV on the Radio, and it's a different lineup every album, and they go for everything from kind of jazzy to funk to super experimental and noisy, and they're just a complete improvised record. There's probably about 5 or 6 of these too, and I reckon they would probably tour 150, almost 200 shows a year as well. Like King Gizzard, I don't know how they find the time for all of this
But that's
stuff.
how they make their money. You know, these bands make money on the
Have
road.
to these days,
Certain
yeah,
bands like that make money on the road.
yeah, because they're never gonna get to that next
Oh.
level because of they're probably their own worst enemy because of their too um, set on their path of weirdness, I
Yeah,
suppose.
and they're not pushing specifics. You know, whatever you say or for or against singles and promoting a single and playing a single over and over again, that's how people get known. I mean, going back to like obviously way back, you know, that Friday in My Mind. I mean, that song got played. Great hooks,
Yeah,
great single. I mean, you could. That's one of those ear candy songs I could play like 20 times in a row and not
yeah.
tired of it for 2.5 minutes or whatever, 3 minutes, whatever it is. And you know, there's a lot of these bands that are great live and they're great in the moment of certain records. I'll put on a live Dead album or a live uh, you know, out there jazz thing, and it's more the sound and the music, but it's not
Mm,
that specific song sometimes. So I don't know.
mm. But yeah, interesting band. I just
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you You told me I spoke earlier that you said I can't show Nick Cave, but I compromised. Okay, so I'm showing Grinderman.
Oh,
It is Nick Cage.
yeah.
Cave. Oh, see, I said it again. Nick Cage. Okay. See,
I
if
was going to guess it was going to be the birthday party, but
that,
nice.
yeah, you know that. Okay, for those of you who don't know Grinderman, it was they only made two records. It was a two off. It's basically they kind of were thinking of the mini Bad Seeds, mini Seeds. It was the bad. If you ever seen Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, it's like 12 people on stage or 10 people, 9 people. It's a huge thing, and I've seen them. I've seen Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds way back maybe 5 times. And then I've seen the recent tour with Warren Ellis,
Mm.
which is with singers. It was a different configuration, definitely. But this is basically just a rock and roll version. And this, first of all, I have two albums, but I realize I can't believe I don't have this proper second album. I have the remix of
Oh,
Iron Man 2, which has its greatness and has its issues. I'll get to that in a minute. But I think this is a wonderful record. This is a kick-ass record. The first two tracks, Get It On and No Pussy Blues. It's Nick Cave at his best uh, preacher, evangelistic, uh, just out there shouting in sort of a beat poetry evangelist to the audience. He's yelling and talking and screaming, and the band comes in. Those first two things have killer, loud, screechy guitar stuff, and it gets like punkish garage, but more like intense stuff. There's some electronics on it. Oregon, you get Warren Ellis's violin and his effect pedals going. It's intense. Um, but my favorite song, it's almost a song that should have been on a Nick Cave record that really doesn't fit, and it opens up side two is Go Tell the Woman. Go tell the
yeah.
woman. Go tell the woman. It's got this almost like uh I don't want to international beat like not reggae or African, but it's got a tango to it, everything. And he's talking about, this meeting women, hooking up women, and just go tell the women I'm here. I mean, it's not misogynistic at all, but it's a hilarious song. But the rest of this record is really cool. That song, I guess, Electric Alice, the third song on side one, is the one after the first like psychotic, intense opening tracks. It gets kind of almost like a rhythmic thing, almost a little krautrock-ish at times, with the repetitiveness drone of it. And again, as I said, Warren Ellis's electronics that he adds to it. But this is such a really, really great record. And this happened, I forgot what time period. This actually came out in 2007, I guess, or is it
Yeah,
2010?
probably about over 10 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. So it's great. And then they were going to do another one right away, and it got sidetracked by a tour and another Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds album. And I realized I don't have the second album. I can't believe it's hard. I think it's rare on vinyl. You might have it. But this remix album, some of it works. People like Robert Fripp is on it and has remixed some tracks and adds some of his Frippatronics guitar stuff. It's a cool record and it is good, but it's just not as good as the first one. And
There
there
it is.
you go. I need to get that version of it. The Wolf ran away for the remix, definitely on here, retouched out or a frame while the photographer was setting up for it. This is two LPs, um, and this is only one LP, but this is a killer record.
Mm.
But I mean, Nick Cave. You talked about him a little bit before. He goes through the different mood periods, and I remember when it was what's the one? Not Pieces of the Sky, with his wife
Oh,
on the
Push the
cover.
Sky.
Yeah, around that time in the Skeleton album,
Yeah.
he got into this kind of like ethereal, just moody kind
Mm.
of sense. I remember I listened to when Ghosteen was announced, they had like a live streaming of it online that everyone in the world could listen to at the same time. And I
Mm.
remember a bunch of people telling me, God, that's the most boring thing I've ever heard. I think it's beautiful. I love that. side of Nick Cave, but also I like this intense like side. And when he gets on there, he is like this this Baptist preacher, just, Elmer Gantry or any of these like just crazy in a good way. He's spiritual, religious, but not like, pushing you into God or Jesus or anything. Yet he does quote God and Jesus in his own way, and sex and sexuality, and gets pretty intense with his expressions here. And Grinder Man in this cover basically is the perfect illustration for the music on this album. Again, except for Go Tell the Woman. That's more like right head, right, red, right, red hand. You
Red
know,
Right.
Red Right Hand, right? The great song about masturbation, right? And it's got that kind of feel to it, that rhythm of that song on here. I can't quote everything.
I saw tours for both of those
I
albums,
saw the
and
first tour. Yeah.
particularly the second tour. I never got to see the birthday party, but I feel like that was as close as I will get to see Nick Cave in that. It was out of control that night. We were literally holding foldbacks off to stop them from coming off the stage because he was smashing them down with his foot.
Oh,
All you could see was Warren Ellis's feet in the air because he was just lying on the ground, smashing effects pedals and doing it. And it was one of the loudest shows I have been to. But and yeah, they reckon that they
it's
destroyed the
intense.
hearing
It's
box.
intense stuff, but it's so good.
Mm.
I played it again this morning I played three of the records this morning that I'm showing today just to get a feel, to get in the mood. We had scheduled this about 3 weeks ago, and we had to reschedule it. So I've had these records out for like 3 weeks, but I wanted to play just to get the Australian feeling of this. And I'm sorry to disappoint some of the audience. No AC/DC in my selection. No Men at Work. Um, who else? Who's like no Olivia Newton-John. I almost picked Olivia Newton-John just to do it, but
All the greats. Yeah.
I didn't want to waste my choice. Okay, your turn.
All right, I'm gonna move to Seattle for this one,
Okay. Is
and
this your
because
last one?
there's a this is my last one, yeah, because there's also a ton of Australian
Okay.
links to this band. I know you don't like grunge,
Well,
but
okay. Well,
well,
go ahead.
I know you. That's pretty much like a blanket statement. Sorry, I know you do like something, but I like kind of like the late 80s, really early 90s era of grunge. I'm not so much into like I was the perfect age at the time when Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Nirvana were the biggest things in the world, and I lapped that up at that age.
I love Nirvana. I will say
Yeah,
that.
I think Nirvana was that's where it's going. I think they're the one that still holds up for me, whereas Soundgarden and Pearl Jam are good at what they do, but it seemed revolutionary sounding at the time. But when I hear it, they do fit into that classic hard rock mold for me. It's comparable to 70s, with the
Yeah.
history of high
A lot
vocals,
of jamming, a
the
lot of
Sabbath
guitar,
riffs, and
long
and
solos.
yeah, and you find out Eddie Vedder's a huge Who fan, and the guitarist Mike McCready's right into Hendrix and that, and it all sort of makes sense. And there's great. There's
And they're
worse.
they're one of the best things that's happened to Seattle. They're better than the football team here. They're like
Yeah,
the sports. I hate to use an analogy, but like people love the Seahawks here. I'm not a football guy,
yeah,
but that's the thing. But Pearl Jam is like the home team band
yeah,
still, and they could sell out like the big stadium for a month if they
yeah.
wanted.
And that's like, as I said, there's like lesser, you know, they're not bad by any means. It's just like, for me, it hasn't aged as gracefully. But the band I really like and still like and buy their records is Mudhoney.
I love Mudhoney. See, I don't see them as grunge.
Well,
They're on
because
the
they're
punky. They're on the punky side of
because
grunge.
they're more the punk end of
I
grunge,
love Mudhoney.
which was what grunge was initially. It had like it was punk influenced heavy guitar rock stuff. Like it
Like
become more.
Green River too.
Yeah, the punk part seemed, except for Nirvana, seemed to get a bit lost in the mix and it become heavier. But these ones, the reason why, like these are special to me because they're both on, I don't know if you see, that's the Orgogo label
Nice.
there, which was that label was also a store in Australia, and it pretty much changed my musical life when I discovered that place of this whole underground of music, which I was completely unaware of. I was when I was younger, I had a young uncle and an older cousin, and so they got me into things like XTC and Elvis Costello and things like that when I was in primary school, which was a bit weird, I suppose, in retrospect. But so I probably already had an ear for underground independent music without knowing it until I discovered it. And like the 90s is where it was just an explosion of all of that indie rock, shoegaze, um, you know, just and noise rock and all those amazing things. And these guys just blew me away when I first heard them. And there was before I moved to Melbourne, my only source of music, which I could discover stuff off the radar a bit, was there was this TV show called Rage, which was on Friday and Saturday nights, and you'd have to stay up till midnight, and it would just show clips. And if you stayed up late enough, that's when the weird stuff started happening. And then I think the first thing I ever saw of Mudhoney was the clip for This Gift on that. And that's kind of rearranged my teenage mind a little bit.
I
And
love those records, both those records.
yeah,
That's kind of like when MTV later did 120 minutes. I don't know if you had it there, but 120 was they would do alternate and more punk and out there and stuff that wouldn't get played during the prime time
yeah,
MTV.
I know of that, but we didn't have. It was pretty hard to find music on TV in Australia, and we did. I don't think then in the 90s we had any what you call cable TV. We didn't have any equivalent of that, and so whatever MTV things I saw would usually be like just a special, like an award show or something like that. But anyway, more Australian connections with Mudhoney was when original bassist Matt Lucan left the band, and Guy Madison replaced him on bass on this album, Since We've Become Translucent. What I like about Mudhoney too is they have a punk album and then they'll do like a garage 60s psychedelic record
They
kind of
do
thing.
they do realist the album that came out about 2 years ago has a lot of psychedelic stuff
Mm,
with the bluish kind of
yeah.
purple color.
Um,
I forgot the name of it.
yeah, it's a good record.
It is a great record.
I saw them on that tour and it'd been the first time I'd seen them since I reckon the early 2000s and 90s. Still fantastic. But yeah, Guy Madison was Australian guy who they would have known through this band. I don't know if I'm allowed to show boobs on your
There's
channel.
no, I don't care. I don't care. Yeah. And there's no rules. I don't have rules on I mean,
Me neither. I probably
those are
spoil
illustrations
it.
anyway. So, I mean, it's art.
So this is his band, Lubricated Goat, and they were kind of a notorious
I don't
band
know
in
that one.
Australia.
I love that cover and I love that record. I
Yeah.
mean, the title,
Well, and
Lubricated
so
Goat.
have you ever heard of the band called Crunt? They've released
Yes,
one record.
I
Well,
have heard
that's
it.
Stu Spasm, who was the leader of Lubricated Goat. It was him and the drummer Russell Simmons from John Spencer Blues Explosion and Kat from Babes in Toyland, who I think was his
Yeah.
wife at the time.
That's one of those band names that or I don't know, we don't know for sure, but
Yeah.
the old thing, you put all these different words in hats and you pick one name here and one name, Lubricated Goat, and they put it together.
Well, they were notorious on Australian TV in about what was it, late 80s or something, and on a live TV show, and they played this, which was it was late at night, but it still caused quite a bit of controversy, and it was on ABC, which is the Australian broadcaster. It's kind of like our BBC, and and they played on this TV show, and they did their song called "In the Raw," and they were in the raw. They were completely nude, except for their guitars and then
Covering up the bits.
yeah, which most bands would just keep the bits covered, but as soon as the camera went near them, they'd go like this with their guitar and let it all hang out, and it so it's just
You can get away with that, like in England and Australia.
yeah.
Americans freak out about that shit.
I'm sure there was a lot of distressed phone calls to the station, and so Mark Arm and Guy Madison played in this band together called Blood Loss. So I might be wrong, but my guess is this is kind of where they first knew of each other. And this is like early 90s, I think. This is on In the Red Records. If you like Mudhoney, you're going to dig this
I love
record.
Mudhoney. Yeah. I've seen
Anyway,
him a bunch of times too. Yeah.
yeah, and apparently Guy Madison lived in Seattle for a long time before he joined Mudhoney, and because he's a nurse, he works in a hospital in Seattle. That's his
Yeah.
main gig. Because all those Mudhoney guys, sad to say,
Well,
they
Turner wrote a
they
book.
all have day jobs as
Was it
well.
Steve Turner? Is that the guy's name?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I read his book that came out, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's about the scene here. It's a great book.
yeah.
If you like those
Well,
kind of things, yeah.
and last of all, just to make it just totally clear
But I'm
that
gonna have a bonus record after my next.
they have a big Australian connection. Is last year I saw the reformed Saints, and Mark Arm was fronting the Saints in place of Chris Bailey, who died a few years ago now. And it had the band actually was all that's left was Ed Cooper on guitar and Ivor Hay the drummer, and Kim Bradshaw he was gone after this record, and I think they had Algie Ward play bass on the next two who went off into the Dam. But when I saw him, Mark Arm was the lead singer. Peter Oxley from the Sunny Boys played bass in the band, and as a second guitar, bit of keyboards, because the albums after these two of the Saints have a open up a bit and they have keys and horns and stuff. So they also had Nick Harvey, who was in the Bad Seeds ever since the start. Like he was Nick Cave's right hand man from the start of the birthday party.
Not right head red, not right red hand man.
I'm glad you said that because it was a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. I couldn't even say the name of the song. The red, yeah, whatever.
But
It's like
so
Redneck Friend. It's actually the same subject as there's a song called Redneck Friend by Jackson Brown. It's the same thing.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, and they had a horn section as well, so they could play like Know Your Product, and it was unbelievable. And Mark Arm did such a fantastic job of the vocals as well. I couldn't imagine it until I saw it, and then it just he was perfect. It was so good.
Nice.
You know, the only thing better would have been if it was Chris Bailey, but it was damn good. So, and I show this record, I feel like nearly every single video I make. So I'm
I'll
glad to.
mention that. I don't have that, but I want to mention that when I have show my bonus record at the very end. I did a bonus just
They've
because.
reissued a box set of it.
Yeah, I know actually. I saw it and I'm not buying it because I'll tell you that. Okay, I'm going to end up my proper ending with all this like old man misogynist guy bands. I want to go for contemporary, and I had to pick a woman, but a woman I love. And I can't believe this first album, she had an EP before this, is 10 years old this year. I can't believe it. And I think it's brilliant. And that is Courtney Barnett. I fucking love her music, her records. I've seen her twice live. This is a copy that had, I don't really give a shit, but had a free slip mat. We don't need that. But
Nice.
she has this, I mean, I love it because she's got the thick Australian accent when she talks. Half her stuff, she's almost talking rather than singing. I mean, it's that sing kind of talk thing, not rapping, but her lyrics are so clever and so obtuse and so brilliant. And I love her band is so tight and dry. You rarely have the reverb drenched guitars and that loud thing. But there's like, the throwaway thing, she's indie. She's some people call it slacker rock, but I think is a bullshit term
Mm.
for that kind of stuff. That seems lazy to me. And she's not lazy at all. She fronts this band just so beautifully. The songs like Debbie Downer, Aqua Profonda, Dead Fox, Elevator Operator, An Illustration of Loneliness, Sleepless in New York. Uh, I think this is the album. Oh no, maybe it's one of the other albums I'll talk about in a minute. But I just love this. I think she wrote a lot of the songs and didn't introduce them to the band until the last minute because she wanted this recording to be fresh. She only
Mm.
had EPs before this, but this was one of those records that became like the darling of indie music 10 years ago. She all like when South by Southwest she performed at, announced this record came out, she was everywhere. In terms of the indie press, even like the Mojos and the Uncuts and the indie press and Pitchfork, this got like in the top 10 record of the year on almost every list. And I turn people on, they mostly like it. Some people don't get her, but she's brilliant. I mean, she plays
Yeah.
guitar. And she it just, she played in bands before this as a lead guitar player, I hear, but I don't know
Yeah,
those
she
bands.
played in who you probably, if you like Courtney Barnett, you would like she played lead guitar in Jen Cloher's band.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
I think you would really her new record is fantastic, Jen Cloher.
Okay.
And she has a Maori New Zealand background, but she's like I think she was born in Australia or she's lived here for a long time. And I
It
don't
can't
know if that's a
be.
recent thing she's found out, but that record addresses a lot of lyrics are based around that, and it's a beautiful
It's
record.
great. There's a certain rawness to this record, but it's not like raw like like garage at all. I mean, again, it's well recorded and really tight, but it's raw. And then the second album, she did an album with Kurt Vile, which I didn't bring up here, which is really excellent
Yeah,
too. I love that record. I didn't pull it today, but her next record, Tell Me How You Really Feel. This is my favorite Courtney Barnett.
yeah, same.
It's a little more refined, but a couple years ago or a year ago when Rhino put out the first television reissue, some people said, "Oh, it's supposed to be screechy and edgy." And Kevin Gray, when he took some of that high. And fuck that shit. I mean, you know, it sounds great. It's a good record. Musically, it's a great record. It's more listenable, but this is the same thing. Again, a little more refined. Great songs again, hilarious songs again, and just very introspective songs. It. If I was to get one, I would get this one. However, I mean, I'd get these two. If I was to get one, I'd buy two. You can't. If
Yeah,
you have
they're
this,
both
you
great
have to have
records.
this. You have
Yeah,
to
I
have
agree.
this. But this is an incredible record. There you
Mm.
go. Like you take it to the beach, and you're out they call it the Gold Coast, right? And they just
Well, that's nowhere where I live,
I
but
know,
yeah,
but isn't that where
okay.
all the beaches are, the naked people,
We have beaches in Melbourne. It's just
uh,
that it's St
and
Kilda
then
Beach. It's got to step past the
I
syringes
do
and
like this, but when this came out, I was disappointed with it a little bit. But
really,
it took a longer time to me. Now I like it a lot,
yeah,
but it took me longer to get into. I just thought,
mm,
God, the other two like this, like right away, man,
yeah.
this is fucking amazing. I love the cover art. I think this is brilliant. What's this called? Things Take Time, Take Time. Courtney
Yeah.
Barnett, and this came
That's
out 2021. So she hasn't
a
announced.
lockdown record.
Pardon me?
It's a lockdown record.
Oh, 2020. Of course it was.
Yeah,
I
and she
remember
collaborated with what's her name? The drummer, um, American band. It's just slipped
she's
my.
dating. Is she dating that drummer? No, because
I don't know.
she's
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I can't
She
remember
likes
her name.
women. That's what I should say. Care. But that doesn't matter. But it's just great stuff. I mean, but this took me a while to grow on it. This is so funny. Back in the 70s, I used to remember like Neil Young records. When you have someone writing like lyrics, like give me a fucking break. You're trying to read all this shit, someone's handwriting. I appreciate the work it takes to do that these days. But
This
it's
is
like,
not one of those spiral ones.
oh.
Those-
So this is kind of like you know who the Unabomber was? It's like the Unabomber manifesto.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I know.
it's in every like um, you know, s- serial killer movie. But I do like this record. I do like it a lot. But again, if nothing else, these two are incredible. Courtney Barnett, Australian. I don't, does she have anything coming out new? Have you heard any word?
I haven't heard anything.
Overdue, right?
Wow, yeah, because that's a few years old now. That last one,
4 years, four
I,
years.
you know, I can't say I'm in with her people, so I maybe
You're not. Before
it's
we can have a last discussion here because for the last, not just since you and I decided to do this, but there's two bands I've been like in search for of records, and they're hard to get in America, and they're expensive. And I sure I can go on Discogs and find some payment, but I don't like, I rarely do that.
Yeah.
And one was the Saints, and that's Saint Records. I don't have that record, but I know that record.
Hmm.
The Saint Records are cool for crazy money here. I know there was a box set. Is that the one that's the box set, that record?
Oh, the first record, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
it's actually,
I don't want to buy the box set because I
yeah,
would just want to get proper records.
yeah,
But the
yeah.
other band is I've been looking for is Radio Birdman. And I used to have this record back in the 70s because I had a friend at Warner Brothers that gave me a promo. And when I did my 95 purge, this is unfortunately, I don't know why the fuck I got rid of it, but I did. And I was in San Rafael, California, which is across the bridge from San Francisco, and I found this copy. And it's a stamped Warner Brothers promo. And I looked online, these go from 50 to $90. This was $29. And the only reason was because, first of all, it's a little worn, but that's not bad. Yeah, that's the cover, right.
Australian
But
cover.
it's ripped here, but I don't really care. The record itself is pristine. And this is a punk record. They're kind of, I guess, one of the first of the punk groups that came out of Australia that kind of really made it a little more. I was
Yeah.
playing it again this today, and I just had forgotten. I put on side two, and the opening track's called Aloha Steve and Dano, and there's a whole lead guitar thing of the. Uh, that's it.
So,
It's
yeah.
of the Hawaii Five-O theme on it. But this is a great record. But
Mm.
there's a couple tracks that aren't quite as punkish with piano, a little more so. But I think it's a really good record. You want to
Yeah.
talk more about Radio Birdman?
Well, to me, they're probably, although I think the Saints probably had more initial success because of the single I'm Stranded got picked up in the UK. They literally mailed out on their own label called Fatal Records. And I think it was Sounds, maybe NME. So this is the best single of this week or any other week. And then I think yeah, EMI in the UK were like, find this band, sign them. Australian EMI had no idea who they were, and then they finally tracked them down, and they had to wait 2 weeks because of the only phone number they had was Ed Cooper's mum's phone number, and he didn't have a phone. And then eventually, yeah, they recorded that record, which they thought was
Eddie,
yeah,
BBC wants you.
exactly.
I want you.
And they thought they were recording
Terrible
demos.
at accents, by the way. So
Yeah, I
you
was just going to let that fly. So yeah.
at least I didn't do like the typical cliche Australian. I'm not going there.
Um, yeah, and so they were shipped off to England thinking that they're going to record the actual album, and that was the album, was their demos of the I'm Stranded record. And
Oh,
like I didn't have it any other way.
it's
And so
great.
they made a bit of a fuss there and then in England for a while, but they didn't kind of fit in because they actually kind of look like hippies compared to the other punks, the Saints. And then Radio Birdman, I think their influence has stretched a lot longer, especially in Australian music of these Detroit Stooges, MC5 influence bands, which
They got a garage sound too. Yeah.
yeah, which is like Hitmen, the Celibate Rifles, Bored from Geelong, Powder Monkeys, all those, and God, all those kind of bands are all, you can hear that Radio Birdman influence. And Dennis Tech, the lead guitarist, he was over here. He's from a Detroit native and studying medicine in Sydney. And that's, yeah. And I think the singer Rob Younger and him played in rival bands for a while. And he, because he was straight from the source, so all these Australians in Sydney were just in awe of him.
It's surprising. I mean, I think some of these have been Saints. I think there were some reissues, and Radio Birdman. I think Sub Pop did a collection, but before I thinking to look for them again, and now they're even the reissues aren't around or expensive, and I just never see them. And so to
Yeah,
pull it up, I had known we were going to do this, and of course I go on this one thing. I've been looking for this particular one, so 90 bucks American is actually a good deal, and only because it's ripped, and I don't really care because the cover is intact, Sire Records, and it's promo, and it's in perfect shape. Looks like it's already been played. Looks like someone like either you know dropped some stuff and it got stuck to the next album, or had sex and it got stuck and it got stuck to something,
They forgot to shelve their
Yeah,
record first.
definitely. Yeah.
But if you ever see this one, that was their second and last record during that
Only
tenure.
two records, huh?
Living Eyes. I got back together, I think, in the 90s and released another one called
Okay.
Xeno Beach. But this is fantastic as well. Really, really good.
Sounds like television. Do the two records, don't do anything else, and then the
Yeah.
90s or whatever to that. Put some.
Dennis Tech was too busy do it because he's a bit of an overachiever. Not only was he studying medicine, he's a pilot. He can pilot commercial, those, and then he's an amazing guitarist. Like,
Well, that's like the band, was it Def Leppard? One of those bands. The guy flies the own plate on a tour. It's one of those.
oh, Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden. There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew it was one, all the same to me. I want to wind down because we're probably just over an hour here. Don't hang up. When I end it here, but Ben, thank you, Ben Rankin. There's a link below to his channel if you want to hear and see
Say the S. If it's Rankin, it's not me. It's Rankins.
Rankins. It's
Yeah,
so there are two of you or more.
yeah.
Okay, as he loves you.
Yeah. See ya. Thanks for having me.
Bye.